There's a legend in the Tower Guard about the Empress's last resort, a safe room inside your chambers holding enough gold to buy a good-sized island.
What's a good-sized island in this world? This is just a random thought that I had during last week's video, but I figured I might as well answer that question. Why? Well, because it would be fun, and I need to keep my list of video ideas from running out too quickly. But anyway, that's enough beating around the bush. Let's find out what kind of island I'm buying with my newfound fortune. Thankfully, we do get into this room, and we find 2 large safes inside. Considering that this room is supposed to be impenetrable, with only 2 keys in existence, I find it hard to believe that there's any hidden safes that contain more gold, so what we find in here is what we get. So we open up the safes and find that both contain 2 of these giant gold blocks. Oh my god, these things are huge. They must weigh like a ton each, and there's 4 of them in this room. There's also an extra gold bar in one of these safes, but to save myself from having to do too much math, I'm gonna pretend that doesn't exist. I mean, no, it totally exists. It's just used for transport and food. Yeah, sure, why not? Okay, so first things first, how much is gold worth? Well, that's actually a little harder to figure out than you'd think. To find the most accurate price, we have to decide when this game is set. Well, thank God there's actually an official timeline, and according to this calendar, the game begins on the 18th day of the month of Earth in 1852. So what the hell does that mean? Well, not a whole lot. This is just some arbitrary calendar. It starts at a random event. In this case, it's the downfall of a violent cult. Basically, this means that just because the game happens in a year called 1852 doesn't mean it's comparable to the year 1852 in our world. So, let's scrap that official calendar and try to date this game on our own. Well, some of the swords seem to be based on side swords from the 1600s. The pistols are able to fire at a decent rate, which tells us that we're at least past the 1500s. The pistols also have the style flintlocks, which again came from the 1600s, but they lasted until the 1800s. And the uniforms came straight out of the 1800s as well. So initially, it's looking like the official year might not be too far off. But let's keep looking. Unfortunately, the system of government isn't much help because empires have been around for the entire history of human civilization, but there is one thing that is a lot more helpful than all of this when trying to date the game. And that is the use of electricity. Electricity was a revolution in our world, so it's reasonable to assume that it would be one of the most important factors in determining the state of Dishonored 2's economy. The world of Dishonored has been using electricity to power machines for at least 30 years according to its timeline. It's kind of odd that they were able to invent highly advanced robotic soldiers in that time, but let's just say that they used some kind of magic to circumvent artificial intelligence.
Oh, joy! Rapture! I've got a brain!
I mean, this is the game where it's totally possible to trap a person's soul inside of a mechanical heart. But to get an idea of where this game's non-magic technology is, I'm going to look at one machine, and that's the arc pylon. By the time of our game, these have been around for about 20 years, and they are shockingly similar to Nikola Tesla's cleverly named Tesla coils, which were invented in 1891. Also, I apologize for that pun. It was terrible. But anyway, this implies that Dishonored 2 is happening in about 1910 in our years. This is a whole 50 years off from the official date, so it's a good thing we checked this. In 1910, the most recent large-scale war, at least for the US, was the Civil War, which had ended about 45 years earlier. In the official game calendar, the most recent listed war was 145 years ago. So Dishonored has gone longer without a war, but both situations have at least a couple generations who haven't seen a serious war, meaning that this shouldn't really affect their economies. However, there is one event that might have an effect on the economy of the game, and that's the rat plague from Dishonored 1. According to the timeline, this plague ended 15 years before the second game. Fortunately, well, wait, this is an epidemic, so unfortunately? Yeah. Unfortunately, there was an outbreak of influenza in 1889 that killed about 1 million people worldwide and hit the US pretty hard. This happens to be about 20 years before 1910, so not far off the 15-year gap we find in the game. So, based off of these facts, 1910 actually looks like a great year to reference for this video. Now that we have a year, let's look at the price of gold. It ends up being $21 per ounce, and that's in today's money. In fact, the price barely changed from 1877 to 1932, so even if we got the date wrong, this is still pretty close. Now, $21 per ounce sounds like a lot of money, but for reference, the current price of gold is around $1,200 per ounce. So the buying power of these blocks might not be as much as you think. Now, to figure out exactly what the buying power is, we're going to have to find the mass of the gold. And to do that, we have to find its volume. Thankfully, that's a super simple problem because these blocks are just cubes. Why? Oh god. No, not calculus. Anything but calculus. I could just pretend it's a cube, but I know how to solve it properly, so I'd feel terrible. And it'd be inaccurate. Damn it. I'm gonna do calculus. Well, they aren't actually cubes, so this is gonna be harder than I thought. But let's get right into the measurements. According to Gamepedia, Emily Caldwin, the character I'm playing in this moment, is 5'10" or 178 centimeters tall. So to get the scale for the safe, we can use Emily's height. Now, we have to remember that the height of her eyes is not the same as her total height. Assuming she has normal human proportions, her eyes will actually fall around 167 centimeters, or 5'6" inches. Now, we could just try to stare at a wall and call that eye level, but to be more accurate, I'm going to use perspective. I drew a few lines, found where they intersected, and that effectively gave me the plane of her eyes. Using this information, I found that the safe is 233 centimeters tall, and from that, I found that the height of just the door is about 125 centimeters. Now, let's move to a second picture to find the dimensions of the gold blocks. This ended up getting pretty complicated, so here's a diagram for anyone who cares. Don't worry, I double-checked all the numbers. Now, let's move on to the volume. Well, after some basic calculus, so much for taking a break from classes, we find that the volume of these giant blocks is about 102,514 cubic centimeters. Now, to help you visualize that, let's put in some more familiar units. That's about 103 liters or 27 gallons. That's a lot of gold. Now, gold weighs about 19.32 grams per cubic centimeter, so that means that each of these blocks weighs about 1,980 kilograms, or 4,365 pounds. And this gives us the final value of $1,466,691.41. That's a lot of money. And remember, there are 4 of these blocks, so that's actually $5,866,765,000.63 total. So, how big of an island can you get for 5.9 million US dollars? Well, for this part, I'm just going to have to use modern prices because I really just don't want to sift through tons of historical records trying to find out how much an island cost in the 1910s. So I found this site called Private Islands Incorporated, and it lists a bunch of islands for sale. The most expensive is $160 million for this surprisingly small island. And it goes all the way down to only $22,000 for this little island in Canada. There were plenty of islands in the $5 million range, but the largest I found was this huge island in the Philippines. The total area is about 248 acres, which is about 1 square kilometer or 0.4 square miles. And I mean, just look at this island. See those little squares? Those are houses. So I think it's safe to say that you have
enough gold to buy a good-sized island.
But anyway, that's where I'm going to end today's video because it's almost 9 minutes long and I should really be studying. I hope you enjoyed this video and that maybe you picked up on some interesting facts along the way, even though this is sort of a pointless question. But anyway, that's all for now. I'm Conhathy, and I'll see you next week.